Good morning. Just like that, the bell tolled, just for us. Of course, you know, relying on technology, just give me a moment here. Here we go. All right. So good morning and welcome to First Parish Brewster. We are a Unitarian Universalist welcoming congregation of people of diverse philosophies and beliefs, people of various cultures and races, sexual orientations, gender identities, abilities, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your path, may this be a place of rest and restoration on your journey. For those of you who may be first-time visitors this morning, welcome. Welcome on this morning which we make sacred by our presence together. Let's give a big welcome to people streaming. And let's wave at the windows if there's anyone outside. I'm Reverend Jessica Clay, happy to be welcoming you to the service this morning with our worship associate, John Kelb. Our services are recorded and available on our YouTube channel midweek. We do ask that those over the age of 4 mask while in our buildings. So do a little mask check. Is your mask on? Is it above your nose? Because they're sneaky. They just seem to crawl down during the service. So let's keep them above our noses. Please silence your cell phones. If you need the restroom, it's through this doorway and the hallway on the right. We do ask that all wear their name tags or fill out the sticker name tags in an effort to be more welcoming. And we also welcome the noises, movements, and mirth that little ones bring. Also, this week is the last week that we're going to be going outside after the service for a little gathering time. As of next week on, we will be going to the parish room. We will not be having any refreshments. I know. Imaginary refreshments, maybe? Because we're all going to stay masked. So just next week, we'll be heading into the parish room. So if you are someone who would like to have a table for something, just contact Jenny during this week to ask her to set up a table for you so we can get back to where we used to have our gathering time after the service. Next Sunday, you're invited to join myself and worship associate Lindsay Strauss as we lead a service on history being made moment by moment. During the month of November, who knows what our theme is? Holding history. You were so close. All are welcome next Sunday at 10 a.m. In community news announcements, we are doing the Wampanoag Food Drive again this year. Please join your Social Justice Committee with a new opportunity to support our neighbors, the Wampanoag tribe, by providing groceries or grocery gift cards to help their food pantry. We've been very generous over the years in this effort. They have many families in need and really appreciate our support. Please drop off the groceries in the alcove outside the parish room. So usually where I stand after the service, that's where you can drop off your groceries. Money will be collected outside today and in the parish room the next 2 Sundays. You can also mail a check to the church office with Wampanoag Food Drive in the memo. And more info can be found in our weekly email, The Angle. Thank you for your generosity with this. So ends our announcements this morning. Welcome to worship today. It is so good to be together.
This song has a chorus that I welcome any of you who wish to join me with. It starts, we are the boat, we are the sea, I sail in you, you sail in me. I think we're ready. It has a melody too, so. We are the boat. We are the boat. Take off my mask. We are the sea. We are the sea. I sail in you. I sail in you. You sail in me. You sail in me. The stream sings it to the river. The river sings it to the sea. The sea sings it to the boat. Carries you and me. Somos el barco Somos el mar, I in ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. We are the sea, I sail in you, I sail in you. You sail in me, you sail in me. The boat that we are sailing on is built by many hands. The sea that we sail it on touches many lands. Somos el barco, somos el mar. Yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boats, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. With our hopes we set the sails to face the winds once more. With our hearts we chart the waters we've never sailed before. Somos el barco, somos el mar. Yo navego en ti, tú navegas en mí. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me. We are the boat, we are the sea. I sail in you, you sail in me.
When I was working, I often traveled to South Korea. 15 trips that added up to about 7 months in the land of the morning calm. One especially memorable experience gave me some insight into how changing historical traditions can be challenging. Lunar New Year is a major holiday in Korea, celebrated over a long weekend. My friend Chae Young-sun invited me to join him and his family for a couple of days. Such kindness. I knew some history and traditions of the holiday, and now I was going to experience them. His parents didn't have room for another guest, so the invitation was to join the gathering at his in-laws' home in the small town of Punji. They live in a traditional country dwelling with room for a guest. I was welcomed by the Song family. Cousins wore traditional dress for my benefit. Delicious food and drink were consumed. I was taught and played a stick tossing game. Young-soon translated all the while. The next morning, I accompanied the Song family on a solemn Lunar New Year tradition, honoring ancestors at their grave sites. The family wore their best clothes, and the favorite food and drink of each ancestor was placed at the graves for sustenance into the next world. On the return trip, Young-soon told me that it was a recent change to visit the wife's side of the family for Lunar New Year, annotating my understanding of the holiday's history. He wasn't happy about the change, and I was initially surprised, as the gathering I attended seemed to be greatly enjoyed by all. In the years I traveled to South Korea, the country was changing rapidly, technologically and economically. Non-discrimination is built into their 1948 Constitution, but as seen here in the US, cultural change is slow. Pushback to change is common and seems to be built into human nature. In retrospect, I shouldn't have been surprised. Is there a lesson for us here? As First Parish Brewster works to bring the 8th principle to life in creating a multicultural and anti-racist congregation, our own history will be reviewed and annotated. Our culture may shift in ways that we haven't anticipated. How will we respond? As we light our chalice today, we recognize that our own knowledge of history is changing, and with it, ourselves. The first hymn this morning is number 153, "Oh, I Woke Up This Morning." You're invited to stand as you are able.
Hymnals. You can put them down because it's a very easy hymn, and I will lead it for you. So don't be too attached to your hymnal. Are we on the right number? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, it didn't sound right. Go pick one right here. Walking and talking. Go ahead and put your hymnals down. Walking and talking with my mind. State of freedom. Walking and talking with my mind. State of freedom. Walking and talking with my mind. State of freedom. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Singing and praying. Singing and praying with my mind. State of freedom. Singing and praying with my mind. State of freedom. Singing and praying with my mind. State of freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Woke up this morning. Woke up this morning with my mind. I can't hear you. State of freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind. State of freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind. State of freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Nicely done. We did a good recovery. Go ahead and be seated. Okay, I'd like to invite up any of our young at heart for our time for all ages. You're going to come on down here. And you can go ahead and have a seat right in front of that pew and face me. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right. All right. So this story is for them and all of you as well. This story this morning is adapted from Reverend Erica Hewitt. Let's see if I can get back up off these stairs. It's going to be a challenge. Okay. So this morning, I have 2 small candles today because I'm grateful for our 4th principle. Who knows what our 4th principle is? This is for the adults. They didn't know it was going to be a test. Does anyone know it? Carol? Search for truth and meaning. Let's all give Carol a gold star this morning. So one kid's version of this 4th principle is we search for what is true. And so the full principle is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Freedom and responsibility are 2 big thoughts. Let's first talk about freedom. Who can tell me what does freedom mean in our religion? Anyone? What was that? No dogma. Free to believe what you want. Anyone else? A third? Free to make new discoveries. I love that. And what about responsibility? What does responsibility mean to you? Respect others' freedoms. Participation. Helping others. What, Diane? Bear the consequences of your choices. Yes. So our Unitarian and Universalist histories are full of people who helped us understand that our search for truth and our job as meaning makers happens with freedom and responsibility. So I'm going to light this first candle in thanks for our religious freedom. Oh. So I lit that for our search for our religious freedom. In thanks for our religious freedom. And then I'm going to light this second candle. Actually, you know what? Hold on. It looked so delicious, I just wanted to eat it. Does anyone want to say what happened? What happened? I'm getting a very wide-eyed look. What happened? I ate a candle. Are you sure? How many people here think I was holding 2 candles? Raj, you good sport, you. One thing I love about being a Unitarian Universalist is that we get to form our own beliefs and decide what's true for us. That's the free part for the search for truth and meaning. Another thing I love about being a UU is that even when we think we know or believe something, we get to question it and change our mind. A lot of you believed I was holding 2 candles until I ate one. And then you had to question that belief, and maybe even someone even guessed that I ate a fake candle made out of an Asian pear. So that is the responsible part of our search for what's true. Try to keep an open mind and allow new information to reshape what we believe what we believe is true. Exactly, right? Yes. Today we're talking in worship about how our fixed ideas of history may need to change with new information. Just like your ideas about the pregnant minister eating a candle in front of you all. That drive must have been really long this morning. And so as you go into the new week and learn new things, you might want to pause and ask yourself, is that really true? How do I know? If you do, you can also offer gratitude that this is what you do in church as well. So now we're going to sing our kids off to their classes, but we're not singing the song in the hymnal. We're singing the old song, because we had a little bit of a mix-up, Go Now in Peace. So if you know that, feel free to, yes, join. Oh, it was an Asian pair. Yes. So feel free to sing along as we sing them out to their classes. I can hear. So you might have heard different people singing different versions of that, because there are many versions of that, and we actually don't sing the original. So there's a whole nother history lesson, but I'm not going to go there today. Will you join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer? You're invited to settle into your seat. Our prayer this morning is on Veterans Day by Ren Bellavance Grace. So I invite you to settle into your seat, cast your eyes down or close them. Just breathe in the space together. We'll begin our prayer this morning with a quote from Meister Eckhart. If the only prayer you ever say in your entire life is thank you, it will be enough. Today we have set aside time to publicly say thank you to our siblings who have served in the Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Navy, and Marines. To say thank you to all of them who served, whatever their role, wherever their service took them. We say thank you to those whose service was brief and to those who made a career of their service. We say thank you to those who remember their service with fondness and to those whose time in service still haunts them. We say thank you to those who returned to us largely intact, who found jobs, started families, and who continue to find ways to serve their communities. We say thank you to veterans who returned with a brokenness so deep that they continue to struggle to find a role or even a home in our communities. God of many names, source of all love, in the face of all this, sometimes the only prayer we have is thank you. We pray it will be enough. Amen. We'll now take a moment of silence, followed by singing Comfort Me 3 times through. one more time. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. Comfort me, comfort me, comfort me, oh my soul. We Are Not Guests by Reverend Alicia Ford. Am I a guest here? Here in this house? Are you? Are we guests here? Here in this house? And whose house do we inhabit? In the small world of our lives, the borders between us, easements, fences, gates, hedges, serve to delineate, to separate us, to remind us of where my property begins and ends, where your property begins and ends. If you cross over, you are a trespasser or a guest in my house. You've worked to own this small plot of land and the house erected on it. You've claimed it. It's now a part of yourself, your definition of self, your identity. If I cross over your fences, I am a trespasser or a guest in your house.
What does it mean then that in 1845, the United States crossed over into Mexico and took half of that country, took land, resources, labor? Was the U.S. trespasser? Guest? Are there to be no consequences for taking what does not belong to you? Should we simply forget whose house we inhabit? To speak of hospitality and immigration often erases historical context, the actions of the past that have led us step by step into this current predicament. Professor Miguel de la Torre writes, perhaps it might be more accurate to speak of the responsibility of restitution rather than the virtue of hospitality. Hospitality, in this case, implies that the house belongs to us, that the land, the resources that are part of this house is ours, and we, who now live here, are being virtuous in our willingness to share. It erases the history that would have us remember that those who cross the border today are choosing to brave the harsh conditions of the desert, those who face the possibility of death, imprisonment, deportation, criminalization, are doing so because the U.S. once crossed their borders to extract their resources and labor. It is for them a matter of survival. It is for the U.S. a matter of restitution.
The prospect of restitution is scary. Where do we begin? With Mexico? With Native Americans? With territories? With the descendants of those who were enslaved? How do we acknowledge and address the complexities of our history, present, and, if we're not conscious, future of dominance? What would right relationship look like? What conditions and considerations would make restitution possible?
And for us, Unitarian Universalists, what would it mean for us to shake off the idea of hospitality as a central principle that is often attached to immigration and delve into the concept of restitution? Whose house do we inhabit? For we are not hosts, we are not owners, nor are we guests. What, then, is our responsibility?
Each week we have the practice of splitting our offertory plate. This morning's offering is a split plate with the Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project. The Wampanoag Language Reclamation Project began in 1993 under the direction of Jesse Little Doe Baird. Through the joint collaborative efforts of members of the Assinet Band of Wampanoag, the Mashpee Wampanoag Tribe, the Wampanoag Tribe of Akina, and the Herring Pond Band of Wampanoag, their mission is to return language fluency to the Wampanoag Nation as a principal means of expression. The Wampanoag language is one of more than 36 languages classified as belonging to the Algonquin language family. It was the first American Indian language to develop and use an alphabetic writing system. There are several ways you can give today. You can text to give. The number is in your order of service. You can donate on our website. If you're streaming in, you can also place a check or cash in the offertory basket. However you choose to give today, we give thanks for your generosity. And our offertory music this morning is by First Parish Brewster member David Sutherland. I apologize, David, I didn't introduce you in the welcome. Thank you for being our guest musician this morning, David. The offertory will now be gratefully received.
Let it go, let it go, let your bitterness go. May your sword of vengeance rest. Find your way to forgive, even as your truth you live. Surely then will your house be blessed. Offer prayer, offer prayer, offer sweet, sweet prayer to your uninvited guest. Won't you turn on your lights so they're welcome through the night? Surely then will your house be blessed. Turn your cheek, turn your cheek, turn your other cheek. May your mercy manifest. When the hawk and the dove soar in circles round your love, surely then will your house be blessed. When the hawk and the dove soar in circles round your love, surely will your house be blessed. Let it go, let it go, let your bitterness go. May your sword of vengeance rest. Learn your way to forgive, even as your truth you live. Surely then will your house be blessed.
Hi, my name is Ricky Bates, and I am a member of the CYM committee. I don't know how many of us have taken the time to read the big plaques on our meeting house walls that list all of the ministers of this church. But if you have, you may have noticed the name of Horatio Alger, who was a minister here from 1864 to 1866. Alger is perhaps best known as an author of books about poor young boys who, through acts of honesty or courage, come to the attention of a wealthy benefactor who helps them achieve their own accomplishments and wealth. Sadly, while Alger was the minister here at First Parish, he committed sexual abuse against children in the congregation. Now, some might think that this sordid event is best left to lie unnoticed in the history books, but we do not believe so. That's not our way. We have committed ourselves with the adoption of the 8th principle to actively work to undo all forms of oppression. Clearly, child sexual abuse is one such oppression. Members of our Children and Youth Ministry Committee have for some time been unhappy that this well-known author appears without any annotation among the list of ministers at First Parish Brewster. We cannot change our history. We can, however, acknowledge it and work to prevent abuse from happening again. Thus, a new plaque has been created, this right here, with the approval of the Board of Trustees, and it will be added to our walls. It reads, Horatio Alger was forced to resign after admitting to sexually abusing young congregants. FPBUU is committed to being a safe congregation for all and will not tolerate sexual abuse or abuse of any kind. Those in positions of authority are uniquely placed to abuse that authority. Alger is certainly not the only minister to have done so, but we must make sure that it never happens again. We must listen closely to anyone who alleges such abuses, be it children or adults. This plaque is intended to tell the truth and to reaffirm our commitment to ending the oppression of abuse of power, even if it shows itself within these sacred walls. We have a safe congregation policy available on our website. We do background checks on all of our children and youth volunteers, and we have a safe congregation task force in order to help prevent this from occurring again. We need each other to make this a safe congregation and to protect our most vulnerable.
So, as Ricky said, we need one another to help protect this congregation and protect our most vulnerable. Will you join me in the responsive reading number 468, We Need One Another, in your gray hymnal? We need one another when we would mourn and we would be comforted. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose but cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of success when we look for someone to share our triumphs. We need one another when we have come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
And now please rise in body or spirit for hymn number 318, We Would Be One. Be seated. Some of you know that I'm currently in a memoir writing class. A few years ago, I wrote 50,000 words of a memoir, and it sat on my computer collecting electronic dust bunnies ever since. So I'm in this class to help me kickstart actually working on it because I wasn't quite sure what it needed. I'm also working with a writing coach. And the feedback I've received from my classmates and my coaches that I don't include a lot of scenes. I can tell about something rather than putting us all there in that moment. And part of this is because some of these things happened so long ago that I worry about my own interpretation of them. If I'm writing the truth of them and what the truth really is. I begin my memoir with the story of my conversion experience, the story of being baptized in the Pacific Ocean and feeling like all my sins were forgiven. So this happened 30 years ago, and I had a lot of sins at 12, let me tell you. A lot. So this is part of my history, yet I get stuck in telling the details of it because I'm so afraid to get it wrong, and I'm aware it's completely subjective, and that my own thoughts and feelings about how my theology has evolved are affecting my ability to write what happened that day, so I get stuck. And I want this book to be as objective as possible, but inherently memoirs, inherently storytelling is not objective. When we tell the truth of the events of our lives, of our own histories, of our own experiences, they're all influenced by what we have seen and done since, how we've processed it, and how others have helped inform our understanding of it. Because when we experience things, as soon as we experience it and it becomes a part of our narrative, it loses the veracity of objectivity. It becomes filtered through our own context. For two people experiencing the same thing, they can explain it in completely different ways and retell it in completely different ways. For example, some of you could come up to me after this and say, I heard this in your sermon and it was so good, and I'll have no idea what you were talking about. And then other people will come up to me and say, you really should have mentioned this, which I totally did. It happens all the time. And one of the, let's see, I lost my, so when I sit down to retell the story of my life, I get stuck in the fear of getting it wrong, fear of not telling history as I know it. And one of the frustrating things about being human is that we are just not objective. That's why we go towards things like science, trying to be as objective as possible, but history is not objective. It is subjective based on the voices that are telling it, the voices that have been silenced. Who is deemed as a trustworthy source, and who chooses to repeat it? In Michel Rolfe Truleau's article, Silencing the Past, Power and Production of History, he examines, according to my colleague Catherine J., how stories get told and what the silences, what the gaps are that exist in the powerful fiction that we call history. He writes about the 4 ways that stories are silenced: in the making of the sources, in the creation of the archive, silences by the people crafting the narrative, and by us as the reader or listener are silences in what is received as trustworthy, as valid. So he begins his paper with the story of the Alamo. How many of you know the story of the Alamo? Okay, I think we have strong history buffs over on this side. It's not a test, it's okay. So in February of 1836, the army of General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna had reached the crumbling walls of the old mission of San Antonio Valero in the Mexican province of Tejas. This had been a Franciscan mission built more than a century before, but it ended up being a place where Spanish and Mexican soldiers had turned it into, in his words, something of a fort, and nicknamed it the Alamo from the name of a Spanish cavalry unit. Mexico, the year before, had recently become an independent country, united together as one strong country, and Tejas, or what we now know as Texas, was part of Mexico. And according to Truleau, a few English-speaking squatters occupied the place, refusing to surrender to General Santa Anna's force. It was not an easy battle, and many of the squatters died, but ultimately Santa Anna won the battle, and it was a great success for them, for Mexico. But a few weeks later, Santa Anna was defeated by Sam Houston, who was the leader of the secessionist Republic of Texas. Truleau says that Santa Anna was defeated twice in that occurrence. Not only was he defeated at the battle at San Jacinto, but he also lost the Battle of the Alamo because of how the story was being retold. Sam Houston's men during the attack on the Mexican army had shouted over and over and over again, "Remember the Alamo." They were changing the narrative of the story. Instead of remembering it as their loss, they were using it as a call to arms. They gave the story new meaning, and Truleau says the military loss was no longer the end point of the narrative, but a necessary turn in the plot. It became the trial of the heroes, which in turn made final victory inevitable and grandiose. He continues to say human beings participate in history both as actors and as narrators. He says that history means both the facts of the matter and the narrative of those facts, both what happened and what is said to have happened. Therefore, if we apply his 4 ways of silencing, stay with me here, to the story, we can see that the first silencing, the making of the sources, whose story did most of you learn about this from, about what happened that day? My guess is that it is the white people who were the squatters, who consistently tried to push the borders of the United States into land that was not theirs because that's what this country was built upon. This is the story that's told in U.S. history books. And the second way is that the story is silenced in the creation of the archive. When people went to write it into history books, they also had a choice about who they consulted and who they consult now in writing about the story? Do they trust the truth of the local indigenous people of the area who've told the story through oral tradition over the centuries? Or is it only what was written by the people in power who told the story? And as I pointed out in Remember the Alamo, people were crafting a narrative around this battle, so it no longer became a narrative of the independent state of Texas losing. It became a rallying cry of heroes. And the fourth way this story is still being silenced is what the reader or listener considers to be valid. In 2019, the local indigenous people of the area, because of construction at the site, filed a claim against the state of Texas, stating that there was an ancient burial ground there of their ancestors. They posited that the state of Texas did not consult them or treat the remains in the ways of their people. The state of Texas was not listening to their truth about that site. Therefore, people in power were deciding whose truth was correct and silencing those who've been silenced for a long time. So I think that as Unitarian Universalists, we have many superpowers, like eating candles. Just making sure you're still with me here. One of our superpowers is the ways that we question things, sometimes to a fault, but other times it serves us, especially with the more anti-racism and countering oppression training that we do. It really leads us to question our own narratives. Question where we get the truth from and who's telling that truth. But we're human. It's so natural to want to categorize and to think that something is completely objective, that we've figured something out. And we try to figure out life around us as we go about our days, and then we come to this place, to this congregation, to wrestle with these bigger questions around theology, meaning-making, and what it means to be a people of covenant. But sometimes we feel like we've questioned enough, we got it figured out, and then we have one narrative that dominates. One narrative that defines what we think of someone based on however they identify themselves. As we ponder what it means to annotate history, I invite you to bring that pondering a little bit wider and think about what it means to annotate your own history with your own theological journey. Not only should we be questioning what historical narratives we're reading and learning about, but also questioning what are our truths around our own personal theology and the theologies of others. So when someone tells you, I'm a Christian, if the person next to you in the pew just now turned to you and said, I'm a Christian, what is the first thing that would come to your mind? I'm not asking you to tell me it. Just think it. Is it a single story narrative? Because some of you I know identify as Christians, and so what comes to your mind is completely different than the person to your right or your left. And the same thing goes for someone who says, I'm an atheist. When they tell someone on the street, I'm an atheist, a single story comes to mind for that person as well. I think the next place that this stranger who they told jumps to is not, well, they must be a member of a UU congregation. So we're invited to have a healthy curiosity about the places we want to categorize, where we want to insist that something is objective, knowing it isn't, and to leave space for not knowing, to leave space for not having all the answers about the meaning of life, about the truth of our pasts. We can still go towards discovering these things, but we can also leave a little space for unknown, a little space for people's narratives, for other people's narratives to enter the picture and inform our own. And our experience of what creates meaning, our experience of the divine, is not a single story. No one has a single story. Our experience of our own history as a congregation, as people, does not have a single story either. The more we can keep our minds open to each other, to widening our narratives, the more we make room for the diversity that is present, and the more room we make to listen to the voices that have been silenced over the years, because our history informs our actions. We can learn from it, we can learn how to move forward, learn where our ancestors went wrong. We can use it to guide our lives, not from a place of shame, but from a place of claiming. And knowing that we may never have the truest version of the story because we weren't there. And even if we were there, we still wouldn't have the truest version. But sometimes we get stuck in wanting to be right. Wanting to be right about our experience of the world, wanting to be right about that book we read, wanting to be right about whether there is or isn't a God, that we lose track of the ways that we are connected and responsible for one another. I had a conflict with a member of this community in my first year here. I honestly don't even remember what the conflict was. And I was telling a colleague about it at the time, and I was so frustrated because I felt like I was right. I felt like I wasn't being understood, I was being maligned, and I didn't want them to go and tell that story to others, painting me historically in an incorrect way. And this colleague said to me, "Is it more important to be right or to be their minister?" Wiser words were never spoken, let me tell you. So our invitation today, when we look at what it means to be a part of annotating history, when we look at what it means to look at the voices that are silenced, when we look at what it means when we get stuck in a single story narrative, our invitation is to remember that it's more important to be in relationship with each other than to be right. That admitting the ways our assumptions and our unconscious biases and prejudices get in the way help to bring us closer to each other. This is the transformative work that we are called to. And remember that when we're telling the narratives of this congregation, when we're telling the history of this congregation, of the ministries of this congregation, to remember there is no single story narrative. When we're telling people who don't know what Unitarian Universalism is, remember there's no single theology, but we are bound together by covenant by the promises that we make under a wide theological tent, with everyone sharing a piece of this history, of this community, of this place. And by bringing all of these together and knowing that all of you are needed, and what a sacred story we have weaved together and continue to weave. Remember that. And as I struggle to put pen to paper and tell the stories of the scenes of my life that have been transformative to me, as I struggle with what the truth is, I invite you into the struggle with me. We are struggling together to tell the truth of our stories and to recognize that it will never be the fullest version it can, but that doesn't mean we stop searching, that we stop listening to each other, and that we stop keeping our minds open to each other. We can remember the Alamo in a completely different way if we are open to it. This is our invitation today as we hold history, to remain open and curious, to keep searching, to remember that we are all interconnected and that our stories matter, and that the stories of who isn't in this room matter, and we will keep trying to seek them out. We will keep telling our stories to each other. We will keep creating meaning together, experiencing those sacred moments of relationship. This is the holy work we are called to do. Are you in? Yes. Amen. Please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath. Why don't you turn and face the middle, face each other for our benediction. In the back, you can turn and face each other because you'll be staring at the organ loft. So try and find someone, make some eye contact. Not to the point where it gets uncomfortable, but a little bit of eye contact. Our benediction today is from Reverend Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. May you remember this truth deeply in your bones as you go from this place out into your week. Amen.